He sits on the edge of a twin bed in a studio apartment that smells like old carpet and someone else's cooking. The mattress sags beneath him. There's no frame, just a box spring on the floor and a single pillow that came with the furnished rental. Through the window, he can see the parking lot of a strip mall, a nail salon, a payday loan place, a pizzeria with a flickering neon sign. It's 3 in the afternoon on a Tuesday, and he has nowhere to be. 40 years old, that's the number that keeps circling in his mind like a vulture. 40, the age his father was when he had it all together. The house, the career, the family dinners, the sense of being someone. And here he is, in this room that costs $800 a month, with a duffel bag of clothes and a checking account that makes him nauseous every time he opens the app. 6 months ago, he had a different life. Not a perfect one, but a life that made sense. A career in middle management at a logistics company. Nothing glamorous, but steady. A marriage that had gone quiet, but still existed. A house in a subdivision where people waved from their driveways. He wasn't winning, but he wasn't losing either. He was just there. Then the floor dropped out. First came the company restructuring. 22 years of service reduced to a severance package and a handshake from a VP who couldn't remember his name. Then his wife, who had been emotionally checked out for years, finally made it official. The divorce papers arrived 3 weeks after he lost his job. The timing felt intentional, like she'd been waiting for him to fall before she walked away. Maybe she had been. The house went next. They sold it fast, split what little equity remained after the lawyers took their cut. He moved into a friend's basement temporarily, then into this studio when the friend's patience wore thin. His kids, 17 and 14, stopped answering his texts with anything more than one-word responses. They stayed with their mother in the new townhouse she rented across town, the one with the nice kitchen and the functional Wi-Fi and the absence of his father's failure hanging in the air. He lost his identity without even noticing it was gone. Now, he sits here, in the middle of a Tuesday afternoon, and realizes he doesn't know how to hold his own body anymore. His shoulders have collapsed inward, like his chest is trying to fold into itself. His head hangs forward. His hands rest between his knees, fingers occasionally picking at a thumbnail until it bleeds. He hasn't looked anyone in the eye in weeks. When he goes to the grocery store, he angles his body away from other people in the aisles, makes himself smaller, hopes no one from his old life will recognize him. This is what rock bottom looks like. Not traumatic, not cinematic, just a middle-aged man in a cheap apartment, breathing shallowly, wondering how he became invisible. But this is also where something else begins.
Because there's a strange thing that happens when you lose everything. A clarity that emerges after the shock wears off and the shame settles into something you can almost live with. You start to notice things you never paid attention to before, like the way your body tells the story of your defeat before you even open your mouth, the way you've been shrinking, compressing, disappearing into your own posture. And somewhere in that noticing, a question forms. What if you could rebuild yourself from the outside in? This is a story about body language, but it's not about faking confidence or power posing your way to success. It's about something deeper, about how the way we hold ourselves in space is both a reflection of our internal state and a tool for changing it. It's about how people who lose everything sometimes find their way back not through positive thinking or vision boards, but through the slow, physical practice of reclaiming their presence in the world. It's about a man who learns to stand up straight again, literally, and what happens when he does. His name doesn't matter. He could be anyone. He could be you. Let's call him David. The first morning David wakes up and decides to pay attention, nothing dramatic happens. He doesn't have an epiphany. He doesn't suddenly feel motivated. He just notices while brushing his teeth in the bathroom mirror that he can't look at his own reflection for more than a second or two before his eyes dart away. He forces himself to try, looks at his face, the lines that have deepened around his mouth, the gray coming in at his temples, the exhaustion in his eyes. He watches himself look away. Then he tries again, holds his own gaze for 3 seconds. 5. His jaw clenches, his breathing gets shallow. He feels something like shame mixed with anger, mixed with grief. He doesn't know it yet, but this is the beginning. That day he starts watching people, really watching them. He goes to a coffee shop, something he's been avoiding because it feels too public, too exposed, and sits in the corner with a cheap drip coffee he makes last for 2 hours. He observes. There's a woman in her 30s at a table near the window working on a laptop. Her posture is open, shoulders back, but not rigid. She takes up space without apologizing for it. When the barista comes by to wipe down nearby tables, she looks up, makes eye contact, smiles briefly, goes back to work. Easy, fluid, present. There's a man his age in a line wearing a suit that's been tailored. He stands with his weight evenly distributed, feet shoulder-width apart. When he orders, he doesn't apologize or hedge. Just states what he wants, pays, and waits, without checking his phone every 10 seconds. His hands rest calmly at his sides. David notices his own body in contrast. He's hunched over his coffee cup like he's trying to protect it. His legs are crossed tightly, one foot tucked behind the other ankle. His free hand is rubbing the back of his neck, a nervous gesture he's been doing so much lately that the skin there is raw. He's taking up as little space as possible, like he's apologizing for existing. He uncrosses his legs, plants both feet on the ground. It feels weird, vulnerable, like he's exposing himself. But he keeps him there. Small thing, tiny, but it's something. Over the next weeks, David begins what he'll later think of as his education in absence. He learns about all the things he's been doing wrong without realizing it, the ways his body has been broadcasting defeat to everyone around him. The collapsed chest, the rounded shoulders, the forward head posture that makes him look like he's perpetually bracing for impact. These aren't just physical problems, they're emotional ones. His body has been shaped by months of stress, shame, and the felt sense of being unwanted. He starts to research. Late at night, in that studio apartment, he falls down rabbit holes of information about body language, nonverbal communication, the physiology of stress and recovery. He learns about micro-expressions, those tiny involuntary facial movements that reveal what we're really feeling. He reads about how trauma and chronic stress literally change our posture, compress our breathing, alter the way we move through space. He learns that winners, people who feel genuinely confident, who have a sense of agency in their lives, tend to have certain physical characteristics. They expand, they take up space, they move with intention rather than reactivity. Their eye contact is steady but not aggressive. Their breathing is deep and diaphragmatic. They have what researchers call postural expansion, a relaxed openness that signals psychological security. And losers, people who feel defeated, powerless, invisible, they compress, they contract, they make themselves small. Their movements are tentative, apologetic, rushed. They avoid eye contact or lock onto it too intensely with an edge of desperation. Their breathing is shallow and chest-based. They touch their faces, their necks, their arms, self-soothing gestures that signal anxiety. David recognizes himself in every description of the loser category, and it guts him. But here's what else he learns. These patterns aren't permanent. They can change. And sometimes changing the outside changes the inside. He starts small, painfully small. He begins with breathing. Every morning before he does anything else, he sits on the edge of that saggy mattress and forces himself to breathe differently. 5 counts in through the nose, filling his belly first, then his chest. 7 counts out through the mouth, completely emptying his lungs. He does this for 5 minutes. At first it feels mechanical, pointless.
His mind wanders to all the things he's lost, all the ways he's failed. But he keeps doing it. And after a week, he notices something. Those 5 minutes are the only time all day when his chest doesn't feel like it's being crushed by an invisible weight. Next, he works on posture. He sets reminders on his phone, 3 times a day. When they go off, wherever he is, he does a quick reset, rolls his shoulders back and down, lengthens his spine, lifts his chest without puffing it out, aligns his head over his shoulders instead of letting it hang forward. It feels fake at first, like he's impersonating someone who has their life together, but he does it anyway. He starts walking differently. Instead of hurrying everywhere with his head down, he slows down, forces himself to lift his gaze to the horizon instead of staring at the sidewalk 3 feet in front of him, lets his arms swing naturally instead of keeping them locked against his sides. People start responding differently. Small things. A barista makes eye contact and smiles. A woman holds a door for him, and he realizes it's because he looked like someone worth holding a door for, not someone to feel sorry for. A guy at the gym nods at him, a simple acknowledgement of shared space. These moments are tiny. They shouldn't matter, but they do. Because David is beginning to realize something crucial. The world responds to the signals we send. And he's been sending signals of defeat for so long that people have learned to look right through him. 3 months in, David gets a call from a former colleague. There's a contract position opening up at a different company, nothing permanent, nothing glamorous, but real work. The colleague is willing to recommend him if he's interested. David's first instinct is panic. He hasn't interviewed in over 2 decades. He has no idea how to sell himself, especially now, especially with the gap in his resume and the divorce and the whole catastrophe of the last year hanging over him like a stain. But he says yes, because what else is he going to do? The interview is scheduled for a Thursday morning. The night before, David barely sleeps. He lies in the dark, running through all the ways he's going to fail. He imagines himself stammering through answers, sweating through his shirt, letting his desperation leak out in every word and gesture. When morning comes, he's exhausted, but he does the breathing exercises, does the posture reset, showers, puts on the one suit he still owns, the one that doesn't fit quite right anymore because he's lost weight from stress. He looks at himself in the mirror before he leaves. Really looks. And instead of looking away, he holds his own gaze and says quietly, "You can do this." He doesn't believe it, but he says it anyway. The interview is in an office park 20 minutes outside the city. David arrives 15 minutes early and sits in his car in the parking lot practicing. He focuses on his breathing, relaxes his shoulders, unclenches his jaw, reminds himself to make eye contact, to sit up straight, to take up space without apologizing for it. When he walks into the building, something strange happens. He doesn't shuffle or hurry. He walks at a measured pace, head up, shoulders back. The receptionist greets him and he meets her eyes, returns her smile. His voice when he gives his name is steady, clear. In the interview itself, he's terrified. His heart is hammering so hard, he's sure they can see it through his shirt. But he sits with both feet planted on the ground, keeps his hands visible and still except when gesturing naturally, maintains eye contact with each of the 3 interviewers in turn. When he doesn't know an answer, he doesn't panic or fill the silence with babbling. He pauses, thinks, responds honestly. At one point, the hiring manager asks about the gap in his employment. David feels his chest start to compress, feels the old instinct to make himself small, to apologize for existing. But instead, he takes a breath and tells a version of the truth that's honest without being desperate. He says, "I went through some significant personal changes last year. A divorce, a job loss. I took some time to reset, and now I'm ready to bring everything I've learned to a new opportunity." He doesn't grovel, doesn't over-explain, just states it and lets it sit. They offer him the contract position 3 days later. The work isn't transformative,
It's basic project coordination, grunt work mostly, the kind of thing he used to delegate to junior employees. But it's something. A reason to shower in the morning, to leave the apartment, to interact with other humans in a professional context. And something starts shifting. David notices that when he shows up with his posture open, when he makes eye contact, when he speaks clearly and without apologizing, people treat him differently. They listen to him in meetings. They ask for his input. They include him in lunch plans. Not because he's suddenly charismatic or fascinating, but because he stops signaling that he doesn't belong. His body is starting to tell a different story. But the real work is happening internally, because David is learning that body language isn't just about how other people perceive you, it's about how you perceive yourself. Every time he straightens his spine, he's sending a message to his own nervous system. You're safe. You don't need to collapse. Every time he takes a full, deep breath, he's telling his body, there's enough. You have enough air, enough space,
Enough time. Every time he makes eye contact and holds it without flinching, he's proving to himself, you can be seen. You can exist in someone else's gaze without disappearing. These are micro practices of self-respect, and over time, they accumulate. 6 months into the contract, David has a moment of recognition. He's walking through downtown on his lunch break, and he catches his reflection in a storefront window. For a second, he doesn't recognize himself. Not because he looks different physically, though he does a little. He's put some weight back on. The gaunt look has eased. But because of the way he's moving through space. He's not hunched, not rushing, not trying to be invisible. He's just there, present, taking up the space his body actually occupies, no more and no less. And in that moment, something unlocks. He realizes that for the first time in over a year, he doesn't feel like he's pretending. The posture, the presence, the way he's holding himself, it's not a performance anymore. It's just how he is now. His kids start noticing. His son, the 17-year-old who's been giving him nothing but monosyllables for months, agrees to meet for dinner. They go to a diner, the kind with vinyl booths and unlimited coffee. At first, it's awkward. The silence is heavy. But David doesn't try to fill it with desperate conversation or apologies. He sits across from his son with an open posture, hands relaxed on the table, makes eye contact when they talk, listens more than he speaks. And when his son finally opens up, about school, about the divorce, about how angry he's been, David doesn't collapse into shame or defensiveness. He just nods, says, "I'm sorry you've been carrying that." Means it. At the end of the meal, his son looks at him and says, "You seem different, Dad." David asks how. "I don't know, just more here, I guess." It's the best compliment he's received in years. The transformation isn't linear. There are still bad days. Days when David wakes up and the weight of everything that happened crushes down on him again. Days when he reverts to old patterns. The slouching, the avoiding, the nervous gestures. Days when he feels like a fraud, like he's just playing at being okay. But those days become less frequent, and when they come, he has tools now. He knows how to reset, knows how to use his body to shift his state, knows that sometimes you have to fake it until you make it, and that's not weakness, it's strategy. He starts expanding his practice, takes up running, something he hasn't done since college. At first, he can barely make it a mile, but he keeps at it. And he notices that running changes more than just his cardiovascular health. It changes the way he holds tension in his body, the way he breathes under stress, the confidence that comes from setting a goal and achieving it, even a small one. He joins a gym, not one of the fancy places with the intimidating equipment and the beautiful people, but a basic 24-hour spot where middle-aged guys like him go to lift weights and not feel judged. He starts strength training, and as his body gets stronger physically, he notices his posture improving naturally. His shoulders pull back without effort, his core engages without him thinking about it, He stands taller because he has the musculature to support it. There's something primal and satisfying about this, about building physical strength as a parallel to building psychological strength, about proving to himself that he's not finished, that at 40, after losing everything, he can still get stronger. 1 year after hitting rock bottom, David is offered a permanent position. Not at the contract company, they don't have openings, but at a competitor that's been watching his work. The salary is better than what he was making before he got laid off. The role has more responsibility, more autonomy. He almost turns it down. His first instinct is still fear. Fear that he'll fail, fear that he's not ready, fear that someone will see through him and realize he's just a guy who fell apart and barely put himself back together. But then he remembers something he learned during those dark months in the studio apartment. Fear and readiness feel identical in the body. The same rapid heartbeat, the same shallow breathing, the same tension. The only difference is the story you tell yourself about what those sensations mean. He takes the job. At the new company, David is the oldest person on his team by a decade. His boss is 32. Most of his colleagues are in their 20s, digital natives who grew up in a different world than he did. But instead of feeling intimidated or irrelevant, David finds that he has something they don't. The presence that comes from having been broken and rebuilt. He's not arrogant about it, he doesn't posture or try to dominate, but he has a groundedness, a centered quality that people respond to. When there's chaos in a meeting, he's the one who stays calm. When there's conflict, he's the one who can de-escalate without taking sides. Not because he's smarter or more skilled, but because his nervous system has learned, through months of practice, how to regulate itself under pressure. This is what body language really is, he realizes. It's not a trick or a technique. It's the outward expression of your internal state. And when you do the work to change your internal state, to process trauma, to build resilience, to cultivate presence, your body language changes automatically. The winners aren't the people who never fall. They're the people who learn how to stand back up. And not just stand, how to stand with dignity, with calm, with the quiet confidence that comes from knowing you've survived the worst and you're still here. His relationship with his kids continues to heal, slowly, with setbacks and breakthroughs and a lot of awkward conversations. But they're having conversations now, real ones, and that's progress. His daughter, the 14-year-old who's been the most distant, starts texting him again. Memes first, just stupid internet jokes. But then questions about homework. Then about a friend's situation at school. Then, late one night, about whether she'll ever trust people again after watching her parents' marriage fall apart. David sits in his apartment, a nicer one now, a one-bedroom in a better neighborhood, and types out a response. Deletes it. Tries again. Finally sends something honest. I don't know. I'm still figuring that out myself. But I think trust starts with trusting yourself, and that takes time. She doesn't respond immediately, but 3 days later, she asks if they can get lunch. Small victories, but they add up. David starts dating again, tentatively, awkwardly. He meets a woman through work, not a colleague, but someone from a partner company. She's 43, divorced, has kids of her own. They have coffee, then dinner, then more dinners. On their third date, she tells him he's different from other men she's met. You actually listen, she says. You don't just wait for your turn to talk. You're present. He almost laughs. Present. That word again. A year ago, he was invisible. Now people see presence in him. But he knows what she means, and he knows how he got here. Through thousands of tiny choices to show up differently in his own body, to breathe, to stand up straight, to make eye contact, to stop compressing himself into nothing. The relationship doesn't last. They're both too damaged, too cautious, carrying too much history, but it ends kindly, with mutual respect. And David walks away from it without collapsing back into the person he was. He feels sadness, yes, disappointment, but not shame, not worthlessness.
He's learned the difference. 2 years after that day in the studio apartment when he couldn't look at himself in the mirror, David is sitting in a different coffee shop. This one is nicer, exposed brick, local art on the walls, the kind of place where people come to work on creative projects or have meaningful conversations. He's here to meet his former boss, the one from the logistics company that let him go. The man reached out recently, said he'd heard David was doing well, asked if they could grab coffee. David agreed, curious what this was about. When his old boss walks in, David sees him differently than he used to. The man looks tired, stressed. There's a tightness around his eyes, a compression in his posture. He's gained weight in his midsection, lost some on his face. His handshake is firm, but his palm is sweaty. They make small talk, catch up on mutual acquaintances, industry gossip. And then his old boss gets to the point. The logistics company is struggling. They're looking for someone to come back and help turn things around. Someone with institutional knowledge, someone they can trust. He's offering David his old job, with a raise. He listens, nods, takes a sip of coffee, and realizes with perfect clarity that he doesn't want it. Not out of bitterness or spite, not because he hasn't forgiven the company for letting him go, but because he's moved on. He's built something new. And more importantly, he's built someone new, a version of himself that doesn't need to go backward to feel whole. He tells his old boss, "Thank you," he's flattered, but he's happy where he is. The man looks surprised, a little deflated. "We really screwed up letting you go," he says. "I wanted you to know that." David nods, accepts it, doesn't need it the way he would have a year ago, but appreciates the acknowledgement nonetheless. They finish their coffee, shake hands, part ways. Walking back to his car, David feels something close to joy. Not the manic, desperate kind, not the fragile kind that shatters at the first sign of trouble, but a deep, grounded sense of okayness, of being enough, of having rebuilt himself into someone he can respect. That night, he texts his son. "Want to throw a football around this weekend?" The response comes back quickly. "Yeah, that sounds good." And David sits there, phone in hand, and allows himself to feel the fullness of this moment. Not perfect, not finished, still carrying scars and losses and things that will never be repaired. But here, present, taking up space in the world without apology and without pretense. This was what recovery looks like. Not a dramatic transformation, not a before and after story where the after has no problems, but a slow, deliberate rebuilding. A choice made over and over to show up in your own body with dignity, to refuse to compress yourself into nothing, to claim your right to exist even after you've lost everything.
The body language of winners isn't about dominance. It's not about power poses or aggressive eye contact or taking up more space than you need. It's about presence, about being fully in your body, in this moment, without apology and without pretense. It's about the calm that comes from knowing you've been broken and you've put yourself back together, and that process has made you someone worth being. David learned this the hard way, through months of practice in a studio apartment that smelled like old carpet, through breathing exercises at dawn, through forcing himself to stand up straight when everything in him wanted to disappear, through the slow, unglamorous work of changing his relationship with his own body. And here's what he knows now that he didn't know then. Your body will tell the truth about who you are. It will broadcast your shame, your fear, your defeat. But it will also broadcast your resilience, your strength, your presence. You get to choose which message to send. Not by lying, not by faking it, but by doing the work, by breathing differently, by standing differently, by moving through the world like you have a right to be here, by showing up again and again, even when you don't feel like it, especially when you don't feel like it. Because the body learns, it remembers, and when you teach it new patterns, patterns of openness instead of compression, of calm instead of reactivity, of presence instead of disappearance, those patterns become real,
They become you. This is how people recover after losing everything. Not through some magic transformation, not through divine intervention or lucky breaks, but through the patient, deliberate practice of reclaiming their physical presence in the world. And in doing so, reclaiming their psychological presence, their sense of self, their right to be here. David is 42 now, still has problems, still has bad days, still carries the weight of everything that happened. But he carries it differently, with straighter shoulders, with deeper breaths, with eyes that can meet other eyes without flinching. He's learned that you don't rebuild your life through grand gestures. You rebuild it through 1,000 tiny moments of showing up, of choosing over and over to inhabit your body with dignity, of refusing to make yourself small, of breathing like you deserve the air, of standing like you have a right to the ground beneath your feet. This is the body language of winners. Not the people who never lose, but the people who lose everything and find a way to stand back up. Slowly, painfully, one breath at a time, one straightened spine at a time, one moment of eye contact at a time. Until one day you catch your reflection in a storefront window and realize you're not pretending anymore. You're just here, present, taking up exactly the space you need. No more, no less. And that, in the end, is enough.